Welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk Real Estate Investing. I'm your host, Sharon Vornholt, and my guest today is Nathan Miller from Rentec Direct. Rentec Direct is a cloud-based software company that services landlords, it services property managers, and they have over 14,000 people that they help out today. Nathan himself is an investor, so he knows about the needs of investors, and that is a really differentiating point as far as I'm concerned. So welcome to the show, Nathan.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for having me.
Why don't we start out just having you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and about your story and how you got started.
Sure. So, 15 years ago, 2005-ish, I had my first investment property, and managing it myself as a landlord was pretty easy. You know, the first property, and I kind of got into that environment thinking of getting more properties, and I got my second and third and fourth. And right around that time, it was a lot of foreclosures available, and properties were kind of cheap in the market. So it was a good time to be investing. And so we rehabbed a couple properties and then grew the portfolio up to about 7 units is what I was managing myself.
Mm-hmm.
And as I got past about 5, I started feeling the pressure of keeping track of like who actually owes me rent, and who was it that said that water heater was bad, and you know, toilet was plugged that they couldn't handle themselves. It started just being there was too much to keep track of, both financially, for taxes and maintenance wise. So it was around about 2007 that I started searching for some software to help me. And I've been in the internet, industry for as long as I can remember. So, I went to the internet to start looking for a good software package that would help me as a small-time landlord. And I searched and spent a good time searching, and was not able to find anything that either met my price point or was mature enough and worked well. So, given my background in the internet industry, which kind of from the internet industry, it brought me into software development industry. I learned how to develop myself through that experience in the internet. I decided just to write an application, write something that would work for me. And kind of the initial idea behind it was just to create a really ugly application, because I don't know pretty. I'm not the graphic guy. To develop an application that would work well for me to keep track of my properties, and I decided at that time also that I would just make it so not only I could log in, but I had a couple friends that were investors. They could use it if they wanted to. And then the goal was actually just to make it free, available on the internet, so anyone could sign up and use this rather simple property management software that I was creating for myself, so they could have the same benefits I was getting.
So it was initially free.
It was, yeah. It was free for a couple of years, in fact. And today it's even still free. We still have a free version that kind of follows those original routes. So I created Rentec Direct version 1, which was, just bluntly, it was super ugly. It did the job. It kept track of who owes rent, some basic maintenance stuff, just the stuff I needed it to as a small landlord. And I thought, I was going to help out, a dozen people or so. I never expected that any more than, a few people would sign up and use the software. But it turned out by about 2009, just 2 years later, there was hundreds of people using it. And from those hundreds of people, I was getting support requests, like it should do this, it should do that. Hey, who do I call for support? And I was like, oh my gosh, I work a full-time job and I don't really have time to do all this support. So it was at that point where I decided to hire our first employee and turn it into a company. And then we started charging a very small nominal amount for the software to pay that employee. And it kind of went from there. That's my roots.
That is really a startup story. I mean, to go from I've got to have something for myself to whoops, I accidentally created a company. So I was like, okay, now I've got a whole new set of problems. So what did you do on the internet? You said you were in the internet business.
Yeah, so I was involved and part owner of a company called Visp.net, and what it ended up being, it started in 1996, and it turned into the largest nationwide wholesale internet company of its time. So we created basically software and the back end services. So any computer store around the country could become an internet service provider. And back then it was selling dial-up access, if you remember that.
Mm-hmm.
Really
I
slow.
remember that.
In its time, it was really fast, but nowadays no one would dare use it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then, we did DSL and wireless and kind of moved along
Mm-hmm.
with the industry. And I did that for almost 20 years.
So that was a little bit of a natural progression into a software business, because I always ask people, so you just woke up one day and you decided I'm going to be in the software business? Because I can't wrap my brain around that thought.
It was definitely a transition because I started as a systems administrator, which is
Mm-hmm.
managing all the servers and everything for the internet provider. I worked my way through the company, ended up eventually becoming president, but during that time, somewhere in between system administrator and president, I found a need to be able to write software for that
Mm-hmm.
company, and I ended up writing a billing system for that company and having to figure that out on my own. I have no
Mm-hmm.
official schooling or anything for it. Back then it didn't really exist so much. So it was a lot
Right.
of using online resources, tutorials, and doing some online classes to figure out how to develop. And that's what got me my development background.
Yeah. So how many years now? Tell me again. Was it between when you started and you decided you needed software? 4 or 5 years? Or
Yeah, I started. So my very first rental was around 2005, I believe, and then I started. Then of course there was the market started slipping, and
mm-hmm.
I picked up another property at the worst possible time. I think it was 2007. Or no, 2005 was my second rental,
Mm-hmm.
which was a pretty bad point because the market was, way up here, and then a couple
Yeah.
years later, way down here. Um, let's see, and then I started Rentec, the application itself, in around 2007. So just a couple of years.
Okay. So it only took you that long, and I have to tell you, it's being a landlord is miserable if you don't have systems and software. It is just miserable. So, really and truly, it was like you said, you couldn't keep up with maintenance requests. A lot of landlords had other jobs. You start out and you rarely just come out of the gate full time. So you're trying to juggle it all. And I look back on that time with just, was really why I really hated being a landlord. It was just miserable. So when you, when a landlord starts to think about using software, it's often really confusing for them. They don't know where to look. What size program do they need? How much is it going to cost? Most beginning landlords are kind of bootstrapped, so they don't have a lot of money. And so where do they? If somebody just really has no clue where to look, what are some criteria, or what do they look for?
Yeah, so a landlord that's managing anything less than a couple hundred properties, the criteria is pretty basic. You want it to keep track of accounting properly.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're just a landlord and not managing on behalf of owners,
Mm-hmm.
then you can get by with a simpler application. It doesn't have to handle what's called trust accounting, which is what property managers have to deal with. So as a landlord, the accounting's fairly simple in that you're receiving rent from your tenants, and you're paying expenses, for
Mm-hmm.
repairs and maintenance. It's almost as simple as that. So you need an application that can competently, keep track of your income. And then one thing that's very important, of course, for landlords is keeping track of all the details for tax purposes. And what happened to me, and what happens to a lot of landlords I know, is we do, especially when we're do-it-yourself landlords and we're managing them ourselves, is when the garbage disposal backs up or gets clogged, or there's a small plumbing issue or something like that. We'll jump in the car, we'll run to Home Depot, we'll buy $35 worth of parts.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Home Depot spits out the receipt, which we throw in the bag with the parts, and then we go and we fix it. When we're done, we throw the bag and the receipt away often.
Yes, yes.
It's just like it's just and we think about it later. We're like, well, it's only $35. What's that? That's like, you know, a $10 tax savings. It's not that big of a deal. But when you do that 50 or 100 times, you know, throughout the year, that all adds up. And just keeping track of every single one of those expenses, and then the big ones like, you know, property taxes and insurance, and homeowners association fees, having those all get kept track of monthly and is very important. And where the software is going to help you is in automating as much as possible. So those receipts, you should be able to just take a picture of them with your phone. Ideally, you know, in the same example, you go to Home Depot, they print out the receipt, and when you get to the location you're doing the job, you just set the receipt out and take a picture on your phone, upload it to the system, and that way it's taken care of. You don't have to keep track of a piece of paper anymore. And then for the recurring stuff, a lot of things are the same amount every month. That'd be like insurance, homeowners association dues. You set those up as a recurring task. That way you put it in once, and then the system automatically records that expense every month for you. That way, as few expenses as possible get lost in the mix, and you have the biggest tax deduction possible at the end of the year, which is going to make your investment properties more profitable.
So are you able to attach, like I went into Office Depot recently and they said, how do you want your receipt? Do you want it emailed, printed, or both? So let's assume that you have the digital version of a receipt. Are you able to somehow attach those to a particular property?
You can, and I like getting email receipts. Any store that does that for me now, I will do that because it saves me from having to keeps me from saving that piece of paper.
Right.
And so what I'll do is when I get back to the office, I'll have that email, and what I'll do is I'll just save that email as a PDF, which now if you use Gmail or use Chrome as a web browser, that's real easy to do. And then I just drag that PDF onto the expense when I enter the expense.
Okay.
That's the easiest, and that's slightly easier than scanning it with your phone. I feel like it saves about one step.
Yeah, I think eventually you'll probably get that. You'll get that choice with most stores. I think they're moving toward it. I've even seen it in, even like a clothing store recently, where you can, it saves them the paper, it saves them the hassle of printing it. So I guess it works for everybody. So when someone is a brand new landlord, they're just starting out. Do you advise them to start from day one with property management software, or do you advise them to get their feet wet and really learn how much they really need software, or what do you tell them?
I think it's a great idea to start with software. It's on day one, software is going to be very inexpensive. The cost for the software, like I was mentioning earlier, we still offer Rentec Basic, which still has the exact same feature set that I developed back in 2007. It's actually a little bit better and prettier now. And that's free for landlords with, I think it's up to 10 properties. So that's a great way to get your feet wet without even spending a penny. But even upgrading to like the pro versions, which add in some cool stuff like accepting online payments and stuff like that, is not expensive. And what happens is if you start with software from day one, you get used to the process of keeping your records straight. Your accountant or CPA, will love you because all the records are in order and you print them out. You basically give them a P&L, for each property, and it saves them probably an hour or two per property of managing your records. And a lot of people save, plenty of money just in their hourly rate with their CPA.
Right. Oh yeah, that's huge. And you're right. They love you when you don't show up. I actually know someone who has a couple hundred properties, and he actually shows up with stacks of like things stapled together. And I just want to say to him, your CPA just supposed to want to kill you. Plus, when he drops dead, who's going to take you on as a client?
Oh, I know. And what does the CPA charge for, going through those box of receipts?
Oh my gosh, yes.
And I mean, that's going to be a lot. That's
well,
Bill.
And I think back to 20 years ago, because I started back in 1998, and there was one person in my area that had a really customized, kind of tricked out version of QuickBooks.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, that was it. I mean, they're really, if you weren't a big apartment community using one of those, what I call the big systems that were in place, there really was not too much to be offered. So that was the big thing back then. There, you could keep track, you could invoice, and you can do some things with QuickBooks, but it's not the same as property management software. So, but I want to talk just a minute for somebody who you want to take from way over here in the old way to the new way. And I'm going to give you an example. So I just went to my RIA meeting last week, and they've been having a discussion. You've got your, what I call the old guys, and then you've got the new young guys that do everything on computers. So the people over here, they want a book. They want to be able to have a book in their truck so that when they need a plumber, they can give business to the RIA members, and they can look it up, and they can also go through there, and as much as I'm digital, I still like to hold a physical book. So they've had this ongoing thing about getting this printed directory. So, because quite frankly, some people still don't know how to use the online website. So it was really kind of comical, because in the instructions, the gal said, just go on to the website, make sure your information is correct. And I've made a short video in the whatever section, and then which was great, by the way. But I was in this conversation where somebody looked at her and said, do you realize who you're talking to? We are the people that don't use the internet. And you're trying to tell us to go on the website and do this. And it was just, so I actually have a friend who has 30 some properties, and she uses a checkbook. I don't know that she even uses a spreadsheet. I don't know how she keeps it straight, but somehow she does. So if I were to be able to convince her to come up from that side over here to the modern side, how in the world do you integrate these people? Do you have, let's say they have 20 or 30 properties maybe. Yeah. How do you get them into your system and show them the value and maybe help them do what needs to be done? Do you offer service or?
Yeah, I mean, and that's a very great point. There is a lot of landlords that are stuck in the old ways. I still go to the grocery store and see people writing checks, to the clerk, and that there is a lot of people that are doing that. So yes, we for anyone coming like onto our system, for example, we provide full training. Just unlimited, as much training as you need. You can call in. We can share a desktop screen. And we can, step by step go through stuff. Of course, we have a lot of training videos. Some people will watch them. Some people want the hands-on support. But as far as getting someone converted from the old way, from pencil and paper to the new way, it's really tough to convince them that it's going to be better for them to go electronic. So an approach, we'll take, and if I'm talking to one of my friends that is resistant like that, I'll focus more on the benefits that are going to come to their tenants and how that then will benefit them. Couple examples, like if you are using a system like ours, your tenants can, on their phone, which every tenant, has their iPhone or their Android, now, and that's how they want to make their rent payment. They don't want to drop cash off, or write a check, because a lot of people don't even have checkbooks anymore. They want to just open up, and just like they would use, PayPal or Venmo or something, they want to be able to make their rent payment via their phone. So that's a facility that we provide. And that saves the landlord, and we roll that into telling the landlord all the time savings that they'll have. No longer do they need to go to the bank and cash checks, because the funds go directly from the tenant's account directly to their account, and they don't even have to record the payment, because that happens automatically in the tenant's ledger also. So 100% automated rent collection is a huge benefit, specifically for the tenant, because it's very convenient for them, but it also helps the landlord out. Being able to report maintenance is another one that tenants want to be able to do electronically. For some reason, our society in general has become resistant to talking on the phone. We want to send a text now instead. Especially younger people, sending text is the way that they communicate. And so to call a landlord, first off, for most tenants is kind of intimidating. They don't want to call the landlord. And so if there's a leak under the sink, they generally won't. You know, they might, if you're lucky, throw a towel under there, but most
Maybe.
likely, yeah, most likely the leak is going to keep dripping until the tenant moves out, and now you have a rotten floor to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
But what good software is going to provide is they're going to let the tenant just open up the app. They can take a picture of it. They can briefly explain what's wrong. They can give an hour or time of day that works well for maintenance to come over and fix it. And they can do that all electronically without ever having to pick up the phone. And then the landlord gets that. It gets recorded into the system, so there's a record of it, and then they just send out their maintenance person to get it taken care of. All happens electronically, and tenants love it.
Mm-hmm. Young tenants love it.
Young tenants love it. Yeah,
Young tenants love it, and it's a little bit. I watched. Mentioned earlier that both my daughters are property managers, and it's kind of funny to watch them. Because they'll. One of them will say, well, just go online and fill out the application, and then, this will happen and this will happen. Well, now I want to stop by your office because I'm a really good tenant. And right there, there's some kind of a problem.
Oh, yeah.
So, but there's, some people are resistant to the new ways. Most of the younger people, like I know people that are in student housing, boy, they are all about, let me just do it. I'll send you a picture. I'll submit it all online. No, I don't want to talk to you. If you want to talk to one of them, you're probably going to have to text them because they are never going to pick up their phone unless it's somebody they know they better, like their mom who's paying the rent or something.
So true.
There is one thing that was always hard to keep together, and it was in a file folder, was all of the history of the property, especially if you had a tenant that stayed for some years and they had a deposit that was made years ago and suddenly they're moving out. And like you said, there's the floor rotted under the kitchen sink, and they've suddenly forgotten that it wasn't that way when they moved in. So there is so much to be said for having this digital history. And then should you ever end up in court, you have a complete record.
Yeah, you absolutely have to have perfect records if you go to court, because the courts are going to side with the tenant. And many landlords have never been to court. I'm fortunate enough I've never had to been. I've just heard all the stories.
Heard the stories.
And the courts will always side with the tenant generally, unless the landlord has proof otherwise.
Right.
And bringing that list, that perfect log of property history, move-in inspections, regular inspections, then move-out inspections, and then maintenance costs. You have to have a very specific, record of those costs in order for them to come off be charged to the tenant in any way.
Right. So it kind of leads me into the next question, which is all of the myriad of forms that you need. So you need rental applications. You might need 7-day letters. You're going to need move-ins, move-out, maintenance requests. So how does all that happen for someone who's used to using paper? How does all of that happen? I mean, to some degree, move-in inspections, what I see is they are still done in person in my area. But then you can take that and you can do just what you said. You can make it a PDF and you can upload that, so that when you go to do the move out, you can actually print out the move in, and there's not too much people can say when they've signed off on it and it's scanned into the system. Yeah. So how does all that happen with the forms? Now, do you have Rentec? Well, we use your company as an example. Rentec specific forms, or let's say I'm a landlord and I want to use my forms specific to Kentucky. Yeah. Can I put those in there?
You definitely can. We have some basic forms, a few like move out letters and move in, move out inspections, just some kind of pre-populate we have a forms section in the software with some basic stuff, but every state is different. Every state has specific legal requirements that, especially leases have to go by. So you can also just upload your own form, and the way our system does it is, usually you'll just copy and paste text in there, and with all your verbiage, and then our forms editor allows for custom fields, so database fields, so you can plug in, I, comma, and then tenant name. And then such and such, it goes on and on and on until you get to the signature. And there might be some other fields like the address, the rent amount, stuff like that. So you put those as what are called dynamic fields, and you create that form once. And then any tenant, you right click on that tenant and go to the forms, and all that data just gets filled into your lease for you automatically. So you don't have to ever type in the tenant's name or their lease amount or anything. That just gets pulled in. And so that's just the newer way of thinking loves that, because it's just automation. You don't ever have to type into a form or anything. But in short, yeah, the answer is you can use any form, whether it's one that you've created, one you get from your local association, one from like Easy Landlord Forms, companies like that, or Blue Moon is another company that I hear of a lot where they provide some state-specific forms.
So just to be clear, if I were to upload my form, and then you said with the little snippets in there, then it could pre-populate into my form, the name, and there's a way to make all of that happen?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Okay. Because leases are very specific, and different landlords want different clauses in there, like no smoking clauses, and and two, whenever you get into, what I've noticed over the years is whenever you have a problem, the next thing you know, it's going in your lease, so long as it meets your state law.
They get longer and longer every year, don't they?
It's kind of like the home inspection business. Well, we never anticipated that one. So from now on, it was like, this is what we're going to do. So let's talk a little bit about your company. I know you were reluctant to talk about it, but I've known about your company for a while, and we've gone over a lot of the benefits. But if someone wanted to, certainly a free trial and free for a few properties, you can't beat that. So how why should they choose Rentec Direct? And as they grow, how does your software allow them to grow and get bigger? Because as you get bigger, you need more, you need different, all of that. So let's talk a little bit about your company.
Okay, sure. Yeah, like I mentioned to you, I think earlier, is we really target the small to mid-sized property managers and landlords. So anyone from a startup with their first property up to around 2,000 properties, that's kind of our sweet spot, which encompasses most of the small to medium-sized property managers. And a couple ways that we differentiate ourselves is, first off, we stick to that market. I've seen without naming any names, but I've seen competitor after competitor in our market. They start with this market, but then they see like, oh, our investors or our financial people, they see a lot more money in the larger property managers. So really all their efforts go towards that. And then these guys kind of get left behind. And you see that in their pricing. A lot of other software products, their startup pricing is really expensive compared to ours. We keep ours nice and low. I think it's like $35 or $40, is like the lowest tier. And that includes a lot of things. Which I guess runs me into another point, is we keep things very transparent with our pricing and very simple. So you come to our company and you get our, you sign up as a landlord with just, say 10 properties. Your price is probably about $40, $45 a month. And we include everything in that. There's no like nickel and dime pricing, later on. Everything's included, which includes some things that often aren't thought of, like a merchant account, which is necessary to accept online credit card or ACH payments, or to accept online applications if you charge for them. So we include that. And merchant accounts, many companies, if you go get your own merchant accounts,
that's a big thing, because that's not an easy thing for a brand new investor, maybe that has a job at just wherever. It's not always that easy to get a merchant account.
Yeah, it can be tough, and we've got special relationships with a merchant provider that works
Mm,
specifically with landlords. So they
okay.
know the market, they know how safe the landlord market is. So we're able to get great rates and all that. Another place where I feel like we excel is in customer support, and we when we hire for customer support positions in our company, we look for people that have been in the property management industry. They've either been
Okay.
landlords or property managers or worked for a property management company in the past. So they bring that experience with them. So not only are they able to help with the software itself, but they can help with like running your business. We get a lot of
Mm-hmm.
like regular questions about, well, what do I in this situation? What do I do? And we
Mm-hmm.
have that experience to at least lend, a helping hand. Um, so, and then the customer support, I think, is huge. That's where so many companies these days, are lacking. You'll call, you'll sit on hold, you'll wait 2 or 3 days for a call back, or you'll get transferred overseas to be helped. We just don't do any of that. We keep everything right here. Where I'm at in Grants Pass is where all of our customer support is also. So I'm directly involved, and I know everybody up there, and we just keep it a very, very tight, good team. So you just won't find better support anywhere. We'll
So
help with.
everybody works in your, that's a great point. Everybody works in one location then? Are
Mhm.
they? Okay.
We're all located here in Grants Pass. It's our headquarters and our only physical location.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because that is so frustrating to be, you brought up a good point about having people that know about, real estate and landlording, because I cannot tell you how many times I've gotten on the phone with someone trying to explain my problem, and they, first of all, have no clue whatsoever about the industry.
Yeah.
And you're trying to explain a problem to them when they don't even understand the very basic things. Then you get an answer back that's not correct, and it's because they didn't understand the question.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're reading an answer out of a book for you. They don't actually
Yes.
know the
Yeah, a
things.
little flip chart type of thing or something. So are your customers primarily, do they primarily have single family homes or apartments or both?
We do have both, but I would say the bulk of it, probably 70-80%, are single family homes.
Single family homes. Interesting. Because I know the people that I know that have apartments, they generally, even the ones like, sixplexes, eightplexes, smaller apartments, they generally, after a very short period of time, are looking for a property, somebody to help with some of that stuff,
For sure.
for sure.
Yeah.
If you had to go back and tell a new landlord, gee, I wish I hadn't have done this, would you have one of those to pass on to somebody?
um, I, gosh, I've been asked that a number of times, and I've been super, super, super lucky with tenants that I've had, and I've never, until recently, um, I've generally never had bad tenants. A few years ago, I turned my properties. I ran out of time, and I turned my properties over to a local property manager.
Mm-hmm.
And since that time, there was one incident that happened, and what could have saved that incident, I think, and this is my advice for any new landlord, is be ultra careful and diligent on your tenant screening. A lot of landlords, especially private landlords, they don't know that they're fully entitled to go up and order credit reports, criminal reports, eviction reports. So those are my three favorites. But I also really enjoy like an address history report based
Mm-hmm.
on get their social security number. Of course, you get their authorization as part of your application. Um, you can find out their entire address history. And what I like to do is compare that address history to the address history that they have on their application.
Application.
Because if on their application they list property A, B, and D, but on their actual address history there's a C in there that they forgot to mention, there's a good chance if you contact that landlord that there's a story behind it.
Mm-hmm.
It also kind of confirms their identity and where they've been from, and if you happen to interview your tenants, you can kind of just match up facts and make sure everything is coming through. But yeah, just making sure you're screening the tenant very well. Always call references. Um, And then one thing I've been historically terrible at is with rent increases.
Yeah.
In our area, rents are going up like crazy right now. And the easiest thing, both for a landlord and a tenant, is to do a scheduled regular rent increase. And for the landlord, if you do one rent increase, like let's say $25 a year is pretty common.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Around here at least. In some areas, I'm sure it's much more. But if you do $25 a year and you do that on an annual basis, and you look back at 3 to 5 years worth of rental history, because you did annual increases, you actually make a lot more money. And that you're a lot more profitable on that property than if you wait 5 years and give
Mm-hmm.
them a $200 or $250
Right.
rent increase. Couple things like you're making extra money each one of those years. And then the other thing is for the tenant, $25 doesn't sound like much. It's just like cost of living increase. Everyone
Mm-hmm.
understands that taxes go up, and so yeah, my rent's going to go up, $25, no problem. But if there's no rent increase for 4 or 5 years, and then you hit them with a $200 rent increase to like catch up, your tenant's history, they're gone
Yeah, they're
because of the
gone.
rent increase. So being regular about rent increases, and
Mm-hmm.
then finally, I guess would be my last piece of advice here would be doing regular inspections. And it's if you ask any private landlord when was the last time you inspected a property, I bet 9 times out of 10 you'll hear well, when they moved in. And how long
Mm-hmm.
ago was that? It was 3 years ago. What's
Mm-hmm.
happened since then? I don't know. But getting tenants just familiar with and notifying them in advance that you'll be by every like 6 months is pretty common. To just
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't have to be we're checking on you, we're looking at what you're doing, but it's like we're coming by to make sure all the appliances are working fine, the smoke detector
Mm-hmm.
batteries are good, and the heating systems working and stuff like that. And then do the inspection at the exact same time. That way it's not intrusive, you're actually doing maintenance, and the tenants appreciate that rather
Right.
than spying on them.
Well, and if you put that in your lease and you tell them it's your lease signing, I think that's key on both the rent increases, that it's in the lease, and that if they know up front that they're going to be getting a rent increase of X number of dollars, or sometimes commercial properties or percentages or different formulas. But if that's in the lease, and like you said, the inspections are in the lease, and you spin it toward, we're going to, on average, we come by every 6 months. We want to make sure that, there aren't any leaks under the sink, like maybe you haven't noticed, where, I think it's all in how you present it. And I think it's crucial that you present it at the time of when you're first getting that tenant in there, don't you?
Absolutely, yeah. That should definitely be in the lease. There'll be inspections every 6 months,
Mm-hmm.
and if you can define what your rent increase is, that's great. Also,
Mm-hmm.
um, most states also require that you give other notice. Also, like in
Right.
Oregon, you have to give, I think, 90 days now for a rent increase. So even if it's in the lease, because the law is a little bit ambiguous,
Mm-hmm.
you still 90 days before that year is up, when the rent increase is going to happen, you have to send them another
Oh,
notice.
really?
Yeah, it's they've been changing a lot of laws over here, and I have a feeling, I think California has done things like that, and it's a trend that's spreading. Um, and same thing with inspections is they'll give them like 24 hours notice before you show up. And
Yeah, I think here it's 48 hours. Yeah, you have to give them. Now you can call them and ask them, say, hey, we're going to be in the neighborhood, and give them, say, is it okay if we come by? As long as you get their permission, it's okay, but you must give them, 48 hours if they don't agree. They don't have to agree. Let me put that around. They don't have to agree, so long as you give them 48 hours notice that you have a reason to come in to do maintenance, or maybe it's your inspection, whatever that might be. But yeah, that's interesting. I have to present that to some of my landlord friends if they've heard any rumblings of that, because that's actually a good idea, though. And if you have a software system, you can spit out a reminder, whatever that might look like. You could put that. I'm sure that could be part of your system.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like other systems probably do this too, but ours will give you a reminder to, do inspections or do rent increases, or rent increases. If they're scheduled, you can actually just set it up. So every year the rent goes up X% or X dollars. That way it just happens automatically. No one has to remember. And you can even set a reminder to send the tenant a notice 3 months in advance for states like Oregon.
Okay. I know one thing I thought of that I forgot to ask you. Do you offer, as part of your service, the credit check and all of that, or are you affiliated with someone that's not always an easy thing? Like if you're, let's say, I remember when National Tenant Network it used to be anybody that could run credit on a tenant. And then they said, well, if you don't have a real physical office, we have to come to your home office. There has to be a lock on the door. We have to make sure that it is real, that you are really a business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and those are safeties that the Congress has put requirements on the credit agencies, and the credit agencies can't. They need to make sure that if they're giving data out on anybody that's considered personal sensitive data, that whoever it's going to is a legitimate operation.
Right.
And what we do is we do include credit, all those reports, credit, criminal, eviction.
Okay.
Plus, a bunch of others for specialized reports also. They're included in the system, and we take care of, in fact, we pay for that site inspection. So that's like I was saying, everything's included when you get software from us. We pay to have someone go out and do that site inspection if it's necessary.
Okay.
And then the reports are included. The reports are available, but you pay per report. That's
right. So you have a choice of what level report you get, I'm assuming.
You bet. And we do like basic packages with the best package having, everything included, credit, criminal, eviction, everything. Or you can some landlords only want to look at a criminal history, for example, and they can just get a criminal report for a lot less if they want.
Okay. Yeah. Boy, that's just really being short-sighted. I know people cut off some of those and they'll do the credit check and maybe do the criminal history, but there is so much value. You save yourself so much grief if you just catch that one person that is really the person you don't want.
Oh my gosh, you're so right. And if you figure that the cost we discount the reports down to our cost for all of our customers, which for all three of those reports, those really important ones, it's $15 is the cost.
You're kidding, because it's like $35 for a credit report here.
Right. And we get a TransUnion credit report, so it's a very good report. And we do nationwide criminal and nationwide eviction. And since people are using our software and they're paying us for the software, we don't really mark up the reports. So we're able to pass them through at a wholesale cost, and that's why they are 15. And they all come back instantly, so you don't have to wait 2 or 3 days for one of those reports. When someone applies, you can give them an answer as soon as you run it. And the other thing you reminded me of is landlords are resistant to running those reports, and sometimes they fear that the cost is, it's just too expensive because I have so many tenants. But usually the tenants pay for the cost of those reports with their application fee.
Right.
We recommend $25 or $30 application fee. And that pays for your $15 worth of reports plus a little extra.
And then some, because I think in my area it's generally always been a break even. You don't really make any money off of it, but you don't really lose any money unless you're running. Well, if you have like two unmarried people that are going to live in the same house and you have to run 2 credits, then that's different. But even at your price, it wouldn't necessarily. It would be a break even. It wouldn't be a make money type of thing. But here, it's a definite additional cost, and people balk at it a lot of times. But that's kind of the way it is. Well, Nathan, thanks so much for coming on today. I thought of all kinds of questions as I went through this. It's interesting to talk about these types of subjects and help people to really set up a business rather than to have a kind of a miserable landlording experience over here, because all these systems and all the things that are offered now, they make such a huge difference in the quality of your life.
Yeah, very true. Well, I really appreciate you having me and inviting me on your show. I've had a great time.
Well, it's been fun. And what's the best way for people to get a hold of you?
Probably the easiest way, I like our website is www.rentecdirect.com. It's RENTEC direct.com. All of our information about our product is up there, but if you click on About Us, then you can see all of our staff and me, and then Twitter, is real common these days. I'm let's see, High Tech, HITECH Landlord, so High Tech Landlord on Twitter. Look me up
Okay.
there.
Okay. Well, great. And I'll link up the the company information and all that in the podcast. So Nathan, thanks again.
Thank you.
This is Sharon Vornholt, and I'll be back next week with another episode of Let's Talk Real Estate Investing. See you later, Nathan.
Thanks.